Okay, hello everybody, and a special warm welcome to Leadership on the Hot Seat. And with me today is the absolutely inspirational, the fabulous, the dynamic Solomon Elliott, the Chief Executive of Student View. Solomon, you are so welcome to Leadership on the Hot Seat, and I'm so delighted to interview you today and to bring you forward as at the beginning of Black History 365. In Wales, we're celebrating not Black History Month because it kicks off a Black History Month, but we are pushing forward with Black History 365. And we're interviewing leaders like yourself. You have been highlighted by Forbes as an inspirational leader in our time. If you don't mind, please tell people how old you are. I mean, this is a huge feat. Many people would love to be featured by Forbes, and you have been. You are also one of the leaders on the diversity panel to the BBC in the UK, across the UK. You have been featured on Google, Financial Times, ITN, BBC. The work you started through Student View has been named the world's best news literacy program in 2019 by Global Youth and News Media Prize. My goodness. Solomon, this is amazing. And we're trying to highlight young Black people who are making a real difference across our world. Now we have people tuning in from Nigeria, from Australia, from America, from London, from Wales. Please tell us more about yourself. Tell us, who is Solomon Elliott? Over to you.
And thank you for inviting me onto this podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. It's sad we're not in person. But to answer your first question, I'm 27 years old. I'll be 28 in February. And I had the idea for Student View in 2016. I just started a program called Teach First, where you're placed in a low-income community and you work in a school with teenagers, if you're in the secondary space like I was, who come from challenging backgrounds. And what I found incredibly frustrating and at times depressing was the low literacy levels amongst the pupils that I taught. I was an English teacher, but also the rise of online misinformation that we started to see before it exploded in 2016 and then again during the coronavirus lockdown. So I had this really grand idea to try and fix these problems. I wasn't quite sure how to do it, but it started off as a modest school newspaper club, which isn't a very innovative or special idea at all. I was the editor of my school newspaper. But what I thought young people could do, rather than writing about 10 reasons why I hate school uniform, they could actually share their views on the issues that really matter in their local communities. And that was unique in many ways because journalism isn't a very well represented industry reflecting the UK's diverse communities, whether that's ethnicity, socioeconomic diversity, or regionality. So it was getting children from low income backgrounds and giving them the opportunity to become media literate, but also to train as local news reporters. And it's grown since I had the idea in 2014. So I was working on it for about a year and a half before I left the Teach First program to go and work on it full time. So yeah, I spent a year or so working after finishing my teaching in the evening on this kind of grand idea to give young people a voice and try and improve our democracy in the UK.
Wow. So this was something you noticed and you worked with disadvantaged young people to give them a voice. I think it's so powerful. It's so different. How did people react to the establishment of Student View? Did you find that people were taking you seriously at the start?
In all honesty, I think anybody who starts a business, a good lesson is if you say to your family, do you think this is a good idea? You probably shouldn't, because they might lie to you. They obviously have your best interests at heart and they want to probably let you down gently. So my family did say it was a good idea, which was a good start, which gave me the encouragement I needed. And I went to the wider world, to journalists. I didn't have many contacts in the industry whatsoever. And my teaching peers, and they all thought it was much needed. Although there were similar initiatives around at the time, and they still are. But yeah, of course, I've been told many things about this idea. It's too ambitious. Kids aren't even interested in the news. They just care about Instagram likes and social media, all kinds of things. I've got a whole long list. So yeah, you kind of, after a while, just focus on the mission and ignore that extra noise, because there is just a lot of noise out there in general, and everybody faces that in their daily lives.
That's incredible. Do you know, I was reading a little bit about what some of the news stories that Student View has actually run, that they've run. Firstly, they've run a series of network of schools, school newsrooms across 20 UK towns and cities. And that some of your clients have been Google, Financial Times, ITN, BBC, and to be named the world's best news literacy program in 2019. I mean, how did that come about? What was it that gripped this award giver to recognize Student View?
Yeah, no, I was completely taken aback by it. Before that, I didn't know that such a thing could exist. But apparently it does. So it was nice to be recognized for that. I think what they really were encouraged by was the grassroots element of Student View. It's from the bottom up. It's not adults telling children what to write. It's young people saying, this is what I see in my daily life, whether that is knife crime, or we've got local stories in newspapers about police car chases in Bradford. These are just things that kids experience every day, but they haven't had a formal outlet to express themselves. And I think they really like that. What they also enjoyed was the fact that somebody like me had got all of these clients on board fairly quickly in a couple of years. That's abnormal in itself as a young Black person working in the media industry. And they also liked that journalists were coming into schools before the coronavirus lockdown happened. So there was that element of bringing online journalists who have big presences, but rooting them in their local communities, whether that's in London or other parts of the country.
Wow. So do you want this to become a global network? When are you going to come and work with our young people in Wales? We have a national BAME, that's Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Young People, led by a guy called Ali Abdi. And he has 250 young people who are chomping at the bits to, get into journalism and write their own stories, you should branch into Wales. And we'd love to work with you, Solomon.
Yeah, we actually did work in Wales last year in Cardiff.
Okay.
So we had a school newsroom in Cardiff. So we were predominantly in England, 19 towns and cities in England, and then one town in, obviously Cardiff. So yeah, no, happy to. And yeah, let's talk about that after the call. It sounds great.
Oh, definitely. So when you look at the world of leadership, because that's what we're looking at, I just had a message from the leader of the Yemeni community in Newport in Wales. Oh, wow. And they're saying, come and work with the Yemeni students, please. The kids want to work with you. They're all getting excited and being tweeted by their leader. They want to adopt, they want to work through Student View. So you've already got many clients. I'll have to compete for your attention. Can I ask, in your journey of leadership then, Solomon, which leaders inspire you? Who have you looked at to think, this is who I want to be like in my work?
I think, in a professional sense, for many young Black children at the time, it was Barack Obama. He became American president, I think, when I was 14. And that was something that you'd never seen before. And that was incredibly inspirational. And I think part of the frustration for me at around when he started running, I think it's his first term for president, this birther conspiracy had originated about whether he was born in Kenya or in Hawaii in the US. And that was just complete misinformation. And I found that quite unsettling. As a Black person, you face a number of barriers, and often people say they're imagined when they're not. They're your lived experiences. And that can also kind of send you a bit crazy when you're trying to explain something that happens, and people don't believe that. And that, I was looking up to him as a 14-year-old Black boy living in South London and thinking, if somebody can say that he doesn't deserve to have that job, that is absolutely kind of what's the hope for the rest of us, quite frankly. And also what I found, so that he was my big inspiration. And then I'd say once I started Student View, I met somebody quite early on, a man called Tom Iwobi. And I went to university with his daughter. And I told her about my idea, and she said, you should talk to my dad. And this was about 5 years ago. And he completely grilled me on the student view. He's a kind of really famous tech entrepreneur. He was named #1 on the power list a few years ago. And he gave me some advice. He said he'll give me some funding immediately, which was great. I never raised any money for Student View before. And then a few years after that, he became the first Black non-executive director at the BBC. And by that point, I'd grown Student View from being in my head to a national program. So he'd been really pleased to see the progress of that. So he's a really big mentor for me. He's also just been made a non-executive director at WPP, which is the world's largest advertising company, and they're on the FTSE 100. So he's definitely a big kind of everyday accessible role model for me. So I'd say those two.
Wow, that's huge. Do you know what is powerful and interesting about you? From very early on, you knew you needed to be mentored. You knew you needed to be supported by a leader who you admired, and a leader whose skills and qualities that you respected. I think that's really powerful that you just were able to cotton on to by sharing your ideas. Somebody heard it and then said, "Oh, I know who can help. Come talk to my dad." That's incredible. So come on, young people out there, get talking to people, share your ideas. But did you ever worry that in sharing your ideas, then Solomon, somebody might steal the idea and go and do it before you?
Definitely, and for sure you would do that. But I'd already decided it was a not-for-profit model, so that people only do things really if they're going to make lots of money, and they try and act quite sneakily, and that incentive's been removed. With this, it's just an inherent good, and you can't make money off children. It's not legal, so that's going to completely disincentivize people anyway from trying to get into this space. So it's only the kind of nutcases who actually think they can change the world who
well, it's so interesting that you chose to work with disadvantaged young people, because it would have been easy for someone to go and launch this in a posh university like Oxford, or let's say Cambridge, or the Junior Eton College, or whatever else. But you made it so that it's everyday grassroots people. I think for me, that is what really grips my heart. What were the challenges that you encountered trying to work with kids, maybe from disadvantaged backgrounds, maybe kids with difficulties in their behavior? How, as a young leader, how did you manage to cope and deal with this?
Yeah, I'd say, in all honesty, the horror stories you might hear in the media about young people from particular backgrounds is the complete opposite in reality. One, because I come from those communities anyway, so that wasn't an issue for me, and I taught in them as a teacher. I think the kind of key thing I worked out early on was that Student View needed to be as an add-on to the curriculum, so children would be taken out of lessons, so they were immediately engaged. It was a kind of a special day where they'd be looking into journalism, so that you had their full attention. And I think if you say to any person, I think many of the problems in the world actually result from people not feeling they're being listened to. And if you look at it that way, and you say to a young person who's from Oldham or Bradford or Derby or Cardiff, and you say, do you know what, you can have a voice, and if your story is good enough, it might be picked up in your local paper. You don't hear that every day in school. So if you give young people an opportunity which actually has a real world impact, you'll find that their levels of engagement immediately spike and soar.
Wow. So did you have to tell anybody to sit down and keep quiet and stop disrupting the sessions ever?
Kids are kids. I actually haven't delivered a session probably about 3 or 4 years now. So I'm very rusty. I just go and watch, but not particularly. Of course, kids are mischievous, but we were working in one school in Derby, and the majority of the boys, it was an all boys school. Some of them had criminal convictions, but then we were teaching them how to issue freedom of information requests, and they were able to ask legitimate questions of the local police force. And that was kind of really important in terms of integrating them into their communities and making them feel valued and allowing them not to express themselves in ways that might be harmful, not only to them, but their peers and their family as well.
Wow. Do you know, Solomon, people are going crazy on my messages. People don't know, but you are a member of our family, and we're so proud of you, all of us in the Iwobi family, because your mother, Auntie Ogugua, is watching, and also all the family are watching. And Alex Iwobi, your uncle, his dad, Uncle Chuka, is watching, and he sent a message now for you. He says, Solomon, it's an absolute pleasure having you around at the Emirates and listening to you today and watching you support your cousin Alex at football. We look forward to inviting you over to Goodison Park to support him at Everton as soon as the fans are all back. And well done on the great work you are doing. We are all so proud of you. What are your goals moving forward? He's asking. I mean, you've hit Forbes, you've hit ITV, HTV, you've hit BBC, you've been on Financial Times. I mean, how bigger do you want to go? How is this panning out for you?
Yeah, I'd say the kind of key thing is that sorry, I just got a work thing and that distracted me, but two kind of key things I worked out during the lockdown. We'd scaled across the country, we'd set up all of these pop-up newsrooms, we'd built up the evidence base, but we hadn't impacted the policy space. If you can improve the curriculum and support government to ensure that the curriculum in England, because that's how it works, reflects the latest media literacy challenges, whether that's deep fakes. I don't know if many of the audience have heard of what a deep fake is. Go and check that out. You're going to be seeing a lot more of that. And I had a meeting last week with parliamentarians from across political parties, the Tories, the SNP, independent politicians as well from the House of Lords, to try and create some pressure on government, but also to support them to reform the curriculum. And that's progressing nicely. So watch this space for that one. And
wow.
Then I'd say the key thing is just scaling what we've done in the UK and taking it internationally. So behind the scenes, we are trying to work on that with some partners, and we've been having meetings and discussions to make that a reality, because the beauty and the kind of privilege of running Student View in the UK is that media freedom is in a much better place than other places in the world. I've met some journalists from across the world, from Syria to Venezuela, since starting this project, and there's no way that something like this could exist in those countries with the leaders that they have. So it's just giving them also the support and the blueprint because of what we've built in the UK with minimal interference. So yeah, scaling internationally, but also impacting the curriculum in the UK is my answer to Uncle Chuka.
Wow. Uncle Chuka, I hope you can hear him. Yes. And I hope you're going to Everton to wear the blue now that Alex has relocated.
Yeah, it looks great. I was going to message Uncle the other day, actually, because he did a couple of good assists.
He did.
Yeah, I was really happy with that.
We were all jumping up and down, getting too excited, especially when he scored the goal, didn't he, in the other match? So, yeah, more to come. I wonder, just before we look at, before I ask you your 3 top leadership tips, can I just ask, how many people do you currently employ, or are they all working as volunteers in developing Student View?
Yeah, so we have, it's a very small team. It's very, very small. And we had to decrease it because of the lockdown. And we had some staff furlough. That's just the nature of being a social entrepreneur. You have to adapt to the situation. So we had 4 in our core team, and we scaled it down to just 2 until we work on other funding opportunities. And then we've got about 7 or so contractors who work for us, whether that's financial management to impact measurement to filming, etc. So it's purely dependent on projects. So the notion of being you can create a lot of impact at scale without having loads of people on your payroll. And that's purely because of just the way technology is and where it is at the moment. We've got, imagine setting this up with how many people on this call. That would have been an absolute nightmare for you and I at the time before the pandemic. And now it's super straightforward.
That's true. Absolutely. And before also you give us your top tips, I mean, when we are looking at influencing our curriculum in Wales, we would love to have a conversation with you about how you're influencing the curriculum in the UK. I've heard about the Black curriculum group and all of that, and the inroads loads of people, thoughts that they have. But any learning that you have developed, it'd be great to organize this for you to maybe have a conversation with all our young people in the National BAME Youth Forum for Wales and explore how they could work with Student View, to develop their voice as well and have an impact here. So looking at leadership for you, the journey so far, what would you say are your top 3 leadership qualities?
Qualities. This is not the tips bit, this is the qualities bit.
Yes.
Okay.
The 3 top, what are the 3 top tips that you have for leaders?
Top tips, I'd say number 1, just listen. You'll have so many problems in life if you don't listen to people. And that leads nicely onto the second one, which is you'll never have all of the answers. So if somebody comes in and pretends that they have an instant fix to your problems or a plan that you have, treat them skeptically, because the chances are they probably haven't looked at it from all angles. And then the third I'd say is the worst somebody could ever say to you is no. So be fearless when you're networking or asking people for insight, connections, etc. Because that's the worst thing somebody could say. And if they do say no, you just get on with your day and move on, and it's life.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so fearlessness, that sense of fearlessness. People who are working in this industry often face backlash. What would you say have been some of, I would say possibly 2 or 3 of your biggest challenges that you've encountered, and how have you overcome them?
I'd say the first, I didn't really see it as a major issue. I tend to see things in kind of just a strategic game where you need to just make certain moves and it will make your path easier. And if you don't make those moves, you'll just be kind of endlessly banging your head against the wall. So obviously I'm young and I'm black, and there aren't many people like me in the media, and there certainly aren't people like me in senior positions of influence in media or education at my age. So find mentors, people who are respected in your field. So one of the things I did was I was nicely introduced by a trustee of mine to a man called Alan Rusbridger, who was the editor of The Guardian for around 20 years or so. So he's one of the most respected journalists in kind of modern British history. And he loved the idea. So once I told everybody that he was on board as my patron, everybody was nice to me all of a sudden. even some people who initially told me my idea wasn't great. So it was quite funny to see how fickle people could be. So I'd say, that was definitely a strategy of mine, and it still is to this day. But I think it's kind of been knocked out of me. I'm quite composed. I think you can see I'm a bit chilled out on this call.
Oh yeah, you are so chilled. Seriously, chillaxed. You are so, take it as it comes.
But I think that's also just temperament, and I've learned that about myself and others as well. Some people just don't have the correct temperament, and they have to learn other leadership skills to support them on what they're doing. But yeah, I'd say I'm lucky. I'm just quite a cool cookie anyway.
Does anything ever faze you, Solomon?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Again, if somebody says no, then you probably shouldn't trust them. All the time.
I like that tip.
No, all the time. But it's exciting as well, and it's super exciting when you have an idea that scares you, and then you kind of jump over that hurdle, and then the next question is what's next. My mum always tells me to enjoy the moment, but I'm not good at following that advice because I'm always thinking about what's next, and I think that has helped me.
Honestly, that is absolutely brilliant. I see such a bright future for you, Solomon, because what has struck me when I read about Student View is that you're looking to give voice to others, especially those who many in society may consider voiceless at the moment. You have given them voice, and you have given them a platform to express themselves. And sometimes it comes out in rage and anger and fear, and then sometimes it comes out in joy and celebration. How do you manage what is put out through Student View? Do you sort of doctor some extreme anger issues that people find, like if they find that somebody's been maltreated and they really are calling for heads to roll and things, do you tend to temper it, or do you let people just vent how they feel?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Initially, it started off as an opinion-based platform. So imagine saying to a 12-year-old, you can write anything you want about something that makes you frustrated, and they're going to come up with all kinds of things, which is good for them. They get it off their chest, and that has a place, which is important. But I decided in order for this to have more impact and to get people to listen, in terms of decision makers, it would need to be based on facts, data, information. So it's basically Thomson Reuters, but run by kids for kids. That's what Student View is. So we're a news agency. So you don't have these kind of massive opinions. There's no room for that. It's just pure fact. And quite a nice example of that was we were working with a school in Harrow in Northwest London, and we still do. It's one of our first schools. And in 2019, they said to us in one of our roundtable discussions, we call it News Talks, they said we have a really rubbish bus service. It never gets us to school on time, and we're late home and we get told off by our parents, and then we get detentions from our teachers. This is completely unfair and unjust, which is true. You would be really annoyed if that was happening to you at the workplace, for instance. So they wrote a letter to TfL and said, look, this is our situation. Sort this out. Come on. And the head of TfL's bus performance network came to their school, and she brought out an iPad. I was there. There were only about 10 of us in the room. This was after school. And she said, yeah, you're right. You do have one of the worst routes in the capital. Here's the spreadsheet showing you all of this data. And that was really powerful for them to see it and know that their voices actually mattered. So what happened at the end of that meeting was she pledged to improve the efficiencies, whatever that means, on 2 bus routes in Harrow. And it actually did happen, because the term after, the kids said that they were never late really to school or home. There were more buses. And that was huge, because those 2 bus routes carry 5.5 million passenger journeys a year. So, 10 school children had impacted not only their journey from school to home, but also their local community as well. So that's one small example of the impact of Student View having a massive impact at scale.
Gosh, that is huge. That is really powerful. The power of using our voice. That's all that's coming through to me, and being articulate, being objective, being factual. So taking out all the emotion, but looking at the facts. Do you know, I have a feeling that you are going to take this global. There will be Student View in America, in Japan, in Holland, in everywhere. It is really a world global movement, and it will be quite interesting. I would love to invite you to give a talk to the United Nations when they do the young people's platform, because I did a talk last 2 weeks ago to the UN on peace and promoting global justice. So I will definitely send them information about you. Reggie, who heads up the Yemeni community, is just going, so he's so excited about you, Solomon, and he says, you are an example to all the young people. Nothing is impossible attitude. He loves that. And he sends you a love heart, big love heart. He said, tell him love, love, love. When are you coming to Newport? And when are you coming to work with our young people? We'll be very excited to host you and Student View. So let's explore how we make that possible and get contracts going, and see how you can bring energy and voice to our young people. They can use the pen. It was there was somebody who said that there's a lot of power in using not just your pen now, but your laptop, I should say. Yes, it's moved on from pens to quails to a laptop. Okay, so let's talk about Black history for a minute. I know that we're talking about leadership, but what are your thoughts on the way that Black leaders are highlighted? Do you think there ought to be more or less? Or do you think that, in society today, the contributions of Black people or people of African and African Caribbean descent are highlighted enough in media, for instance?
It's a really good question. I wrote an article on it, I think last week, for the Black History Month magazine. And I kind of went back to when I was at school, and if you're a Black kid in a room of predominantly white children and the month is announced, you kind of squirm in your seat because everybody's looking at you. And it's your time, which is very kind of everybody to give you your month, to look at all of the achievements of people from your community. But having grown up a bit more and kind of understanding more about the world, I do think it's really important and has a place, because unfortunately, for a number of reasons, we're just not portrayed in the correct light at the moment. I think that's definitely become easier with social media. I think over the lockdown, young Black people that inspired me were Marcus Rashford for his campaign on school meals for children during the summer holidays. And like you mentioned, the Black curriculum as well. And I actually studied history at Cambridge, although you kind of denigrated the university. But I, in kind of my leadership journey, wanted to know more about the history, not only of the UK, but also the contributions made by Black Britons. And sadly, I didn't learn that much. I wanted to do a dissertation on Black British history, and I was told by my lecturer that it's not going to really fly at Cambridge because you won't have access to the right professors. And that was told to me, I think, in 2013, 2014. So there's still a long way to go. And that's why we do need a month, because if that's happening to undergrads at Oxbridge, then there's serious problems there. I think also it's determined in terms of the comfortability of Black people, it's who tells the story and how it's told. So if it's told in a very corny way where it's paternalistic and we're being spoken down to by very kind newscasters, then it's going to obviously be very patronizing in tone, and it's not going to serve its purpose. But I think Black History Month can be very important in terms of uncovering heroes and heroines from our community, because we have been here for quite some time, not necessarily in the numbers that we are now, but there has been massive impact made by people of African descent in the UK for centuries now. So yeah, it's definitely still important and not redundant in my eyes.
Absolutely. Wow. Do you know, if you wouldn't mind sharing your article with us, we could also highlight that. I have to say, Solomon, we are miles ahead of you all in London, because we've moved from just Black History Month to Black History 365. And we're saying it should be every day of every week of every month of every year. So we are literally in Wales moving away from Black History Month, because like you said, everybody focuses on all Black people in 1 month. And now people are saying, are you demanding more? We gave you a month, now you want the whole year. Yes, because we believe that Black history is Welsh history. When do you think, because you are a young person, when do you think this is going to actually be a reality? Certainly, I'm way over my 50s, so it might not be in my lifetime, but do you have hope, Solomon, that it will happen?
No, definitely. I think I saw, linking to the Black and Welsh point, there was a really good documentary about the miners, which I'd never actually heard of, and that was on the BBC, and I was really pleased to see that. And that was told by the lens of a former Welsh Black footballer. So I thought that was really powerful. So I think it is only improving. And in all honesty, because we all have access to great technology now, people are just going to go and do their own thing anyway. So you don't have these kind of gatekeepers who show us this is kind of what you need to be, or this is what you need to view. People from all backgrounds are just creating their own entertainment or media or information spaces, for good or bad. So it's up to the status quo, organizations like the BBC and ITV, etc., the broadcasters, to keep up with the vast interests of people in this country.
So what advice do you have for people who are desperately facing racism because of their skin color, because of their accents? I mean, you highlighted a lot of the individuals in schools, especially in parts of Wales or London, who come from disadvantaged backgrounds anyway. And then to add that to being Black or Asian or minority ethnic or even Eastern European, you're facing additional barriers sometimes. How do you feel? What would you advise a young person who's going through racism in terms of using their voice? How could they do that? Because we've seen a lot from the Black Lives Matter movement and across the world, but especially in London and in Wales, we've seen the growth of Black Lives Matter, where young people are coming onto the streets and voicing their anger and irritation at what is happening. So any advice or top tips that you might give people who are facing racism in their own personal lives?
Yeah, I'd say if you're a school child and you're experiencing it, I spoke to my old head teacher about this during the lockdown with what happened with George Floyd, etc. And it's just about having open, honest conversations. I
Yeah.
completely understand it's very difficult when you're a child and you're telling your teacher this is what you're experiencing, because you might feel you might be unpopular, you might feel embarrassed. It kind of depends what educational setting you're in. Because the
Yeah.
majority of children from minority backgrounds actually go to schools where they're in the majority, or they're not kind of the one of very few youngsters there from a BAME background. But I'd say there are countless examples of people you can look up to who have gone through adversity from our community, and that should fill you with pride. That should fill you with hope. Speak to your family, educate your family about heroes that you found about. Ask them about their own stories, the elder members of your family, your aunties, your uncles, your parents, your grandparents, because the chances are the stories that they have will certainly inspire you as well, because things were, it's not perfect now, but they were a lot harder back then. And I'd say use facts. That's kind of my big thing in life. If you have information, they can't get emotional about it. And if they do, they're revealing something about their own prejudices and biases. And then they kind of need to realize they need to work on that themselves. And there's lots of information out there which shows the Black British experience at present, and it's not on par with the rest of the majority of society. So there's lots of information out there. Ask your family and friends about their experiences. Oral history is incredibly important, and yeah, enjoy it, because it's a time to celebrate as well. Black History Month is a celebration as well. Yes, our people have experienced depression and some kind of awful things in the past, and we still go through difficult times today, but there are also lots of stories of love and joy as well that we can all get behind and enjoy.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. We need to embrace this concept of cheer and challenge, not just always being so negative about what we're going through, which are adversely affecting our lives on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes, honestly, it is hard to be positive when you are in that moment. But then when the dust settles, do take time to celebrate the good things that make this nation just incredibly wonderful. And I think is that when I was a trustee to the British Red Cross, our chairperson, who I greatly admire, who's coming on the channel in November, his name is Lord Charles Allen. He said to me, Uzo, as a leader, you must learn to have equal portions of cheer and challenge. So it's just exactly what you're saying. Let's talk about the tough times, but also let's cheer on the good things that are happening. So I think personally that we're coming to the tail end of this. I want to talk to you forever. My husband, Andrew, your uncle, he says, Solomon, what a brilliant interview. You have developed into such a fine young man. The whole family are so proud of you. And I think he echoes the views of, I'm sure, everybody. Your aunties were messaging me on WhatsApp. They're also excited. But not just that, people from Nigeria who were tuning in from a youth project. They're very excited. They're sending messages. Wow, wow, wow. Faces and emojis popping everywhere. So I think you're about to win the most popular contest on the platform. So just to wrap up, before you finish, I just want to ask you, if you could wrap up your experiences and up to date in terms of Student View, what would you say gives you the passion and energy to keep going? What is it that you keeps you awake at night is what I'm trying to say. What would you say energizes you in this work? Because it can be quite discouraging, in the current pandemic, with the lockdown, everyone's locked in, things are very difficult for people. What keeps you awake in the night thinking, this is why I do what I do?
That's a really good question. I'd say it's probably people. I managed to convince people who I didn't think I could convince about the work that I'm doing. And I think that's satisfying, but also shows people are aware of the scale of this challenge, and it can't be solved by an individual or an organization. It's dependent on a coalition to ensure that misinformation doesn't spread to the destructive levels that it is at present. And also that we have a chasm in our society where we don't give young people and people from underrepresented backgrounds enough of a say in our public life. So I'd say this progression, I can see it, and that's what encourages me. So I'd say that is my answer. I'm seeing progress.
Wow. That is, if that isn't positivism, I don't know what that is. Do you know, Solomon, you have been such a joy. Everybody around you are just full of support, encouragement, and we just want you to reach for the skies. And such an inspiration for men and women right across the UK and right global to dare to dream, dare to believe in yourself, and dare to see a gap in society and plug that gap, because you can. And there are goodwill people of goodwill who will support young people with a brilliant idea to make it happen. And like you said, don't be discouraged. And sometimes as family, we have the most supportive thought, but what we actually say limits our children. You know, like I was saying to Ife, your cousin, I said, oh, with your music, you are going places. I think you definitely will be played, your piece will be played in London. She says, Mom, I'm talking global. I will play with Beyonce one day. I'm like, okay. And Ed Sheeran, okay. And Clean Bandit. I was like, all right, she's way over. So it's great you're not letting anybody limit what you can do. I think Forbes, watch out. There's more to come from Solomon. And I'm sure everybody will want you to join me in thanking you and celebrating your achievements. And everybody add Student View on Twitter. Reggie, the leader of the Yemeni community, said, well done, young man. You are a very inspirational young man. Keep moving forward and inspiring others along your journey. How incredible is that? I hope you're streaming this on your channel, or at least you can share the YouTube link so that people can hear it, because it is an inspirational story. And right now with the pandemic, everyone is a little bit on a down. And just hearing your perseverance with this project is going to really lift the spirit. I could listen to you forever. You say things I want to say in a slightly gentler, better way. So we'll definitely be inviting you back to Wales to speak in person when the lockdown is over. But it just leaves me nothing more but to say huge warm thanks to you, Solomon Elliott, Chief Executive of Student View. Now, everybody, if you've been tuning in from all over the world, thank you for joining us for Leadership on the Hot Seat. I just want to thank Taiwo Okeneye of Vivid Block, who has been responsible for the IT sharing of this work. We thank you to the whole team for presenting and for making this happen. And I want to say next week, because through our Black History month, the whole month of October, as part of Black History 365, I'll be interviewing a leader once a week. So next week, we have the next leader, who is Dr. Chuma Osuchukwu, who is the writer of numerous books on leadership. In fact, he used to be a diplomat from Nigeria. He was appointed and sent to work here in the UK and different countries. So he's used all his experiences of leadership to create and write up to 3-4 books. So we're going to talk to him about some of his books and some of the work that he's doing. So we thank you so much, Solomon Elliott, and please come back again and see us, especially come see us in Wales. Diolch yn fawr. That means thank you in Welsh. Thank you very much.
Take care, Auntie. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.